The call, I was a youth minister for 10 years in a parish, and I was content, loved what I was doing. I've always loved teenagers, and in the course of those 10 years, we watched the ministry grow. We had a great team of people. We watched the ministry grow from about 12 students to over 500 kids, and during that time, it was exciting. I loved where I was at. However, we had a group of about 50 young people who were peer ministers, and we would take them to different places, and they'd do retreats and rallies for other parishes. And many places had no youth ministry. It was like there was a feast in our parish and a famine in so many other places. And it was after a while that was starting to bother me. Kids would walk away from some of these events really excited, but when we come back the next year, it was like nothing happened. And so, like, there was nothing. The igniting that occurred was never stoked. It was never brought to any kind of maturity. So after watching that for several years, I really started to pray about that, and it was after some real serious discernment that I felt like, as I listened, that I was called to try to multiply what was happening in one parish. And that's, I went away, took that very seriously. Went away for 3 days of just fasting, prayer, and just really sought to discern what God was calling me to do. And I'm a father. I'm married, and I have 6 children. They were all like, at that time, they were 8 and under. And so it was, it was a serious consideration whether, if I was going to address this and try to do something about it. And it was during that time, it was after the 3rd day of prayer, and it was like I woke up in the morning and I knew that this was the moment that God would really speak to me. It was just had that spiritual clarity. And I'm not a fan of like Bible roulette, where you open up the Bible and, there's always that joke you open up and it says, Judas went out and hugged himself. Ooh, what's wrong? So I've never been a very big fan of it. But I really knew that as I woke up that morning, I really felt that the Lord was saying, open the scriptures. And when I opened them up to a scripture that addressed all my vulnerabilities and was so clear and so right that, and then I really felt open it again, and I opened a second scripture that was so clear that there was no possible way that I could deny that God was calling me to do this. It was a lot of risk. I was going from the security of a 10-year experience. I was going from, obviously an established place to starting. I was the founder of the organization too. So there's a lot of this going on, a lot of risk going on, that I need to know very clearly that God was calling me to do it. And the security of that time and that clarity brought me through the tough times, because it wasn't easy. A startup, doing things new, all kinds of obstacles and difficulties I never ran into. As I navigated those, I always would go back to that time where God spoke to me very clearly through those scriptures. It wasn't always so. I think, I was a 5th grade CCD dropout. I was one of those guys who didn't really care for church. Although initially I had a very powerful experience at my first Eucharist. That was really the first time that faith really became real. And it was typical during that time. It was in the 60s. And I was, 7 years old, and my mom, I remember going on my way to church. I remember my mom preparing all the festivities afterwards. So I was really excited about this party, making my first communion. This was something I'd been looking forward to. And of course, there's no air conditioning. You couldn't eat from the night before. And so I had the second, I think it was like 11 o'clock. So here I am in a very hot, crowded church. And I'm sitting there, and my throat is starting to constrict, and I'm feeling hot, and everything's starting to close up, and like the Looney Tune cartoons where at the end it just starts that circle starts to get smaller and smaller. That was what was happening to me before I was, it was probably during the Gospels, and it's getting smaller and smaller, and I'm realizing I'm gonna pass out. I'm gonna go out. And I remember I remember praying, like, 7 years old. Lord, I don't want to miss my first communion. Please don't let me go out. And as I prayed that circle, it was about this small. I was seconds, and that circle, that blackness started to open up, and it was like fresh air came, and I survived it, and I made my first communion. But I always remember that as a point of answered prayer, that God was real.